Literature brings the heart, you know, and connects the heart and the mind. So brings emotional intelligence, brings empathy into our way of thinking. But please don't get me wrong, I'm not claiming that writers are wise people. I think as novelists we're a mess, you know. But what I am claiming is that the art of storytelling is wise. I think when I write, I feel this in my bones, in my soul. I feel like I'm tapping into something that is older than me, bigger than me, and definitely wiser than me. And that is the art of storytelling. It does not belong to a single ethnicity or religion or class or region. It belongs to all humanity. It is so ancient, so universal, and at the same time capable of renewing itself constantly. Books became my friends, my companions from an early age onwards, from my childhood onwards. But that's not because I was planning to become a writer someday. That's not because I was hoping to become a novelist or anything like that. To be honest, I didn't even know such a thing was possible. It was more of an existential need, you know. I was an only child. I was a very lonely child. I was raised by a single mom, single working mom, and partly by my grandmother. And I was on my own for long stretches of time, and I thought life was very boring. For me, Storyland was much more interesting. It was much more colorful. It was almost like an existential need to journey into another space of possibility, of existence. And so books showed me that there were other worlds beyond my little corner of the universe. And I'm very grateful that that happened. And that's why I think the need to read, the need for books came to me much, much, much before than the desire or the wish to become a writer. As a writer, I'm very interested in this feeling of otherness. I think storytellers are not only drawn to stories. Of course we love stories, we love words, we love language, but I believe we're equally drawn to silences and the silenced. Anyone who feels hurt, othernized, or pushed to the periphery, whose story has been forgotten or discarded, my heart organically goes in that direction. But this is not a rational choice. It's something much, much deeper for me. And maybe it goes all the way back to my own childhood. You know, growing up, for different reasons and at different stages of my life, I felt like the other myself. I was born in France. My parents got separated shortly afterwards. My father stayed in France, got married again, and my mom brought me to Turkey. We came to my grandmother's house, and this was a very conservative, very patriarchal and very inward-looking neighborhood where I felt like we were the odd ones out. You know, we didn't quite fit in. But I also felt like the other over the years, maybe when I realized that even though my father was very, very absent in my life and had almost no contact with me throughout the years, when I discovered much later in life that he had been a very good father to my half-brothers, I think that feeling of being the other child also somehow shaped me. But then again, you know, when I moved to Spain with my mom, a sense of cultural gap that I had to overcome added another element of maybe otherness. As I, you know, grew up, this discovery, you discover your own sexual identity, being bisexual in a country like Turkey, maybe added another layer of otherness, and so on and on and on, you know. So at very different moments of my life, I felt close to that feeling of being an outsider, but enough of an insider to understand, to feel, to connect, almost like a threshold between outside and inside. You're there. It's actually a very lonely space for the artist, but it's a very good space for the art itself. This is another little item that's very close to my heart. I also have a big wooden carved statue of Don Quixote and Sancho Panza. Don Quixote changed me in so many ways. I read it, I was very young when I read it for the first time. I read a children's edition in Spain, and it really, really changed me in so many ways. I was this Turkish child, only child with my mom living there, and somehow I felt connected to this knight roaming freely across the Iberian Peninsula in his imaginary world. So even though at first glance we had nothing in common, he showed me how to move beyond my own corner of the universe. And until I read Don Quixote in earnest much later, I didn't know that you could structure novels like that. And the creativity and the chutzpah that it has, how daring it is, how it invites us to the world of imagination. All of that spoke very deeply to me. So anyway, Don Quixote is important for me, yes. Why London? I moved to this city more than 16 years ago now. Throughout my childhood, my youth, I lived in different countries, cities, but always went back to Istanbul, and I fell in love with Istanbul. And Istanbul shaped me and shaped my writing in a very deep way, and I do miss Istanbul a lot. I also feel connected to the people, the subcultures, the rhythm of the city, the chaos of the city. It's a question that I think about a lot. Do we leave our motherlands behind, or do we carry them with us? I think we do. Even when we're miles and continents away, they come with us. They seep into our dreams. I think about these questions a lot. What does it mean, to be an immigrant? What does it mean to be an exile? What does it mean to have a sense of belonging? Can we have multiple belongings? Can we have multiple homes? Or can we have portable homelands that we carry with us? So all of these questions matter to me. But that said, I think I came to London for a number of reasons. Primarily it was the language, because I felt at home in this language. But also it was the diversity, the cosmopolitan, the multicultural nature of the city. And I want to say this, and I want to emphasize this, because we live in a world in which the word diversity has become a negative concept, which is easily discarded today. Multiculturalism has become just it's so belittled in today's world. And I want to champion these values. They matter to me. They made me who I am. I think in life we do not learn much from sameness. If all my friends speak like me, vote like me, dress like me, it means I'm surrounded by my mirror image. And that is not a very nourishing experience. It can even be a very narcissistic experience. But in life we learn from differences. I'm not claiming this is easy, but if we can create a space of coexistence, if we can have shared values, and in addition, respect for each other's differences and stories and diversity, that is a good combination for a robust civil society, which is essential for the longevity of democracy. So there's a part of me that genuinely believes in the beauty of diversity. And I think that was one of the main reasons why I came here. And one more reason that I might add was a sense of freedom. Yeah, I think I needed that. My first novels, my first 4 novels were written in Turkish. And then there came a moment in my life when I felt like I wanted to migrate into another zone of existence. Being a Turkish novelist sometimes can be a heavy experience. Being a female novelist from Turkey can sometimes be even heavier. You need to deal with layers of sexism, misogyny, patriarchy, some of it visible, some of it more subtle. From politics to history to gender to sexuality, whatever you write about, you can offend the authorities. In a day, in a night, you can be put on trial, you can be prosecuted, investigated, digitally lynched, called a traitor, and so on, all of which I have experienced time and time again. I think there came a moment in my life when I felt like if I can move or migrate into another space, another language, it will give me a bit of a cognitive distance. I needed that cognitive distance. I'm not claiming that, this is the right path for every writer. In my case, this is how it worked. And so when I moved into the English language, even though it was a huge challenge for me, because it's always harder to write in a second or third language. English is my third language. Growing up, Spanish was my second language. But what I found in this language was an additional sense of freedom. It was almost like when you want to see a painting more closely, you don't necessarily take a step forward, you take a step back. And taking a step back and putting a little bit of cognitive distance between myself and the culture where I come from maybe allowed me to see the place where I come from much more closely. It brought me closer, not necessarily far off. That said, over the years I realized, still to this day, if my writing has melancholy, sorrow, longing, I still find these things much, much easier to express in Turkish. But when it comes to humor, I love and I adore humor. I think humor is our oxygen. And I'm not talking about condescending humor in which the writer situates themselves, himself or herself above and makes fun of people's weaknesses. I'm not talking about that kind of humor, but a compassionate humor in which we can laugh at ourselves, and the human condition, but with tenderness, with kindness. So that kind of compassionate humor, I believe, is our oxygen in a world that is so broken. And in that regard, I find humor, irony, and satire much, much easier in English. The novel as a form is such a lonely art. It's the loneliest form of art. I think as a novelist you are on your own for days, for weeks, for months, sometimes years it takes to finish a novel. And so solitude is a big part of this. And I think the inner garden is so important. The energy that you need, the faith, the secular faith that you need comes from within. But the interesting thing about novels is, even though you are on your own in that imaginary world, when the book comes out, you connect with humanity. Also, while you're writing, you connect with humanity. So it's an art form that does not take you into a zone of selfishness, but allows you to connect with your fellow human beings and to see what you have in common. I think in storyland, there's no such thing as us versus them. There's no such thing as I and the other, In fact, the other is my brother, the other is my sister. You realize I am the other. So it dismantles dualities. I think we live in a world in which we are bombarded by snippets of information every single day, every moment. It's the world of hyperinformation and fast consumption and instant gratification. But the truth is, our brains are not wired in this way. We cannot process this much information. So what we do is we just scroll up and down. We get morsels of information about this and that, giving us the illusion and the impression that we know something about everything. Nobody can know something about everything. We forgot to say, I don't know. When was the last time we ever said, I don't know to any question? You can ask me anything. If I don't know the answer, I will Google it. In the next 5 minutes, I'll be able to say a few things about the subject, and I will think that that's enough. But that's not knowledge, And I think I don't know was a good starting point for philosophy. It was important for Socrates. It was important for pre-Socratic philosophers. So there's a part of me that wants to go back to that point of, I don't know, but I'm ready to learn. I'm on a journey. So I think we live in a moment in time in which there's way too much information, but very little knowledge and even less wisdom. Can we change this ratio? Because it's not helping us anymore. I think we should read across the board, both fiction and non-fiction. I always believe that writers need to be good readers. We need to be curious readers. Let's read anything and everything that speaks to us. I've never believed in that distinction between highbrow literature and lowbrow literature? Who makes those distinctions, you know? Let's read anything and everything that speaks to us. So it could be graphic novels, it could be political science, it could be botany, cookbooks. I love cookbooks. I think they're amazing. They're a very, very good channel to understand the culture, history, people. So let's read all of that. But let's also read poetry. Let's definitely read novels, because whatever is in life is inside a novel. And the second thing I believe that writers need to be, in addition to being good readers, is good listeners. Just to try to listen what people are saying, with what kind of emotions they're saying what they're saying, but also the gaps between words, the silences, the pauses, you know, the buried stories. So I try to be a good listener as well as a curious reader. So this is actually the flood tablet of the Epic of Gilgamesh, which played an important role in my recent novel. I like to think about the Epic of Gilgamesh in today's world. Of course, this is one of the oldest pieces of literature known in human history. And before it was written down on clay tablets by scribes, it was transmitted via oral culture. So grandparents telling it to their grandchildren, which means the epic is actually much, much older than we know. And of course, it was one of the many tablets found in the library of King Ashurbanipal. But I like to think about that, you know, ever since this epic was told and then written down, so many empires have come and gone, so many strong men, mighty kings have perished, and even the tallest architectural structures have crumbled to dust. But a poem made of words and a poem made of breath, has survived the tides of history. And thousands of years later, here we are today reading it and still learning from it. So I think for me the epic symbolizes or represents the resilience of literature. I think literature has a very gentle and quiet, but a very, very profound power that goes beyond borders of time, geography, and identity. In my latest novel, There Are Rivers in the Sky, I tell the story of three characters who seem to be very different at first glance, but they are connected. And then two rivers, which are the River Thames and the River Tigris in the Middle East, and one ancient poem, which is the Epic of Gilgamesh. So 3, 2, 1, and everything is connected via a tiny, small, single drop of water. The way this novel came to me, you know, at first glance, it might look like an epic novel in the sense that it does journey across countries and centuries and continents. So the canvas is broad and multi-layered, but actually everything started with that tiny raindrop. It was almost like a spiritual question, you know, maybe the same question that William Blake asked about a grain of sand. Can we see a whole world in a grain of sand? Can I see the story inside the raindrop? Something that we take for granted. But if I may add this quickly, I say this as a writer, as a storyteller, who comes from a part of the world where water scarcity is not an abstract phenomenon, is not some hypothetical question in the air, it's an acute reality. Today, out of the most 10 water-stressed nations in the world, 7 are in the Middle East and in North Africa. Our rivers are dying, our rivers are drying up, and this has, of course, massive consequences for everyone, but primarily for women and for children and for the poor. You know, they are the ones who carry this burden in a very disproportionate way. Also, usually in traditional societies, women, young women, are water carriers, so they bring water to their communities. When there's no drinkable water nearby, the distance that a young woman has to walk increases, unfortunately increasing the possibility for gender violence. So what I'm trying to say is, in our minds, we put these things in different boxes. Like, this is the box for climate crisis. So people are interested in climate can open that box. This is the box for water scarcity. Some people will open that. And then we say this is the box for women's rights or gender equality, and that's the box or drawer for racial equality. But in reality, everything is connected. There are no boxes, there are no drawers. And if we care about one thing, we should also be caring about the other things because of how interconnected these issues are. And I think water reminds us that we are connected as fellow human beings, and we're also connected with nature. We're not above nature, we're not outside nature, we're only a small part of a very delicate ecosystem. So all I'm trying to say is today when we talk about climate crisis, I think we're primarily talking about the story of water. It gives us the impression that there's an abundance of water with sea levels rising, with flash floods, with heavy rain, but the irony is within this abundance there's not enough water to drink. I am very interested in the stories of nature. I'm also very interested in ecofeminism, the kind of feminism that tries to join the dots, connect the dots between environmental concerns and social humanitarian concerns. But I also perhaps need to tell you that because of my own upbringing, I feel attached to different traditions of storytelling. Of course, the European novel shaped me and my writing in so many ways, and I feel deeply connected to this canon. But at the same time, because of my childhood, because of my upbringing and my love, I also feel connected to the oral storytelling of the Balkans, Asia Minor, the Middle East and the Levant. To the best of my ability, I would love my work to be a bridge builder between written culture and oral culture, and between these different traditions of storytelling. So for instance, when I tap into that world of oral storytelling, of the region where I come from, and when I remember my own grandmother's stories, in her world, water would tell us something, trees would whisper, mountains would rumble, earth had a voice. So this is a votive candle dedicated to James Baldwin. I found it in a little shop in America, and I like it very much because at the back it says he's the patron saint of poets, uncles and exiles. And I like Baldwin a lot. I think he was an amazing author, but also an amazing public intellectual, an amazing thinker. It's very interesting, the word intellectual is not used in a positive way in the Anglo-Saxon world. That is not the tradition in many other countries. Here in the UK, people think that the term means something arrogant or hubris, but actually I would love to open up that concept. I think we need more women in the public space as public intellectuals. We need more young people. We need more working class public intellectuals. So instead of, discarding the term, is there a way to open it up and make it more welcoming to people of all backgrounds? In my opinion, he was an amazing public thinker and a public intellectual. Books have changed me so much, and I really mean it when I say books can help us or save us or can show us the way, because all of this happened to me. I also believe that the novels we write change us as novelists. I see this with each and every book that I have finished over the years. It's almost like I was a different person when I started writing them, and by the time you finish, something has shifted inside your psyche, your soul. You have learned a lot, but also sometimes unlearned. Unlearned is also an important part of learning. What do I mean by that? There are so many stereotypes, prejudices, cliches, or easy conclusions that we internalize as human beings about each other without sometimes being aware of it. But through literature, sometimes we also realize that we have to do a bit of unlearning. Take those out. That's an important part of the learning journey. So books change us, and they do this in a very gentle way. If I may add this, I think it's very unfortunate that in the English language we use the word fiction as if it were the opposite of the word fact. And it gives us the impression that fiction has nothing to do with reality, nothing to do with what's happening in the world, and it's just, a place you go to if you want to escape reality. That is not true. I think fiction is deeply, deeply interested in truth. and it brings us closer to truth. But it does it in its own way, in a way that only literature can, by taking us out of our own boxes of identity, out of our own little atomized cocoons, and helping us to journey into someone else's space, another era, another moment in time, another space. And when we come back, we've changed a little bit. Something has shifted in us. So I do very much believe in the transformative power of literature.